Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate everyone giving up a bit of their time over lunch. Hopefully you've got your sandwich or grab something to eat, because for the next 30, 40 minutes, we're going to take you on a bit of a journey to the new frontier of technology when it comes to accounts payable. I'm the host, Sean Doherty. I'm the partner and alliance manager for Australia and New Zealand for Ephesoft. I've spent the last 6 years in the automation space, looking at all the weird and wonderful ways AP solutions have been developed. With me today is Matt Denny.
Hello, everyone.
Matt's the managing director for ARM IT. Matt's been an industry veteran for a long time. I think it was back when this space was known as the transformation area. Back when it was referred to more as business process automation, and when cloud was very much a hosting thing. And for those playing at home, that was a very long time ago. Now, today we're going to show you the joining of two innovative solutions to give you really a robust AP automation solution, and it's known as AP Valet. To make it relevant, we're going to focus on three areas where automation makes life easier in AP: streamlining the whole process itself, the costs associated with AP processing, and finally mitigating the risks, the risks associated with not automating, and really the tangible benefits that come from it. Beyond that, we're going to show you how innovative, quick, simple, and agile this solution is through a very live demonstration. Look, if there's any questions, please type them in the checkbox and we'll get to answering those at the end of the demonstration. And also, I'd ask you to stick around to the end, as we'll get some follow-up details that we would like to express to you guys who have joined us today. So I'm going to start with this. Busy is the new stupid. I mean, I can't really lay claim to having coined this term. It was actually out of a blog I read a few months ago, but it really resonated with me for a number of reasons. And especially when we talk about AP, because really there isn't much of a department out there who's as busy as AP. The unfortunate thing is a lot of organizations really like to lead that process as business as usual. To really say, I guess, that busyness is a reflection on productivity. And that's a little bit short-sighted. There's no value add in that. There's no forward thinking, no vision. But look, let's not understate. Accounts payable can be a very complex department. Think about compliance, approval, rules you have to adhere to. Think about the different business units, which all might have different invoice rules coming through. Then you add things like currency, tax rules. That just adds a whole layer of complexity. But the good thing about AP, it really does make a lot of sense to automate because there's huge value that comes from it. Think about it when you start an AP project though, you do realize it is a very complex beast. But I really hope to show you today how easy a solution can be and where its strengths lies is not just in terms of its capabilities, but it's terms of actually bringing an ROI within the organization. What we want to show you today as well, just to make it clear, is really much the exception handling. If we follow the happy path of an invoice through an organization, and Matt will talk about this in a little bit more detail later on, we wouldn't see anything. So really we want to slow down this demonstration, show you those exception handling points, and really give you an idea about the robustness of the solution. Because think about the way your AP staff interact with an invoice. Think about the hundreds of checks they perform on any given document. We really want to comprehensively automate that. And we do that through a number of things like machine learning. We are able to save a lot of the business rules as we go along. And the real challenge, and I want you to keep this in your mind when we go through the demonstration, is how can we take all of that complexity, put it into a solution, and then deploy it into the business within 4 weeks. I mean, that's just revolutionary. But if we didn't automate though, if we didn't get to that level of automation, and we left that complexity as it is, really what we're starting to do is having impact on costs. There really isn't a one figure when it comes to the cost of a manual invoice. I mean, it really depends on who you actually speak to. For the Sterling Commerce organization, they talk anywhere between $12 to $40. Concur, a little bit more exact. They talk around about $12.90. I mean, then even the accounts payable network, we're talking about $15 an invoice. So really, what that actually kind of showcases there is there's a lot of complexity and there's not exactly one size fits all when it comes to assessing the cost of process. I mean, all of these experts are actually, dictating different kind of ideas around what the cost of process really is. But one thing that they all do agree on, and I really want to make this clear if you've never done any investigation, automating your AP arena, it makes it significantly cheaper. I mean, the AP network talks around savings of 60 to 80% versus a manual process. I mean, we're talking about getting things down to about $5 or below for an invoice. Think about what that does for a bottom line. But really, when we want to ascertain your cost of process, you really got to think about the way an invoice goes through an organization. And there are a myriad of things around direct costs, indirect costs, hidden costs. I mean, direct costs, besides being your immediate AP staff costs, we're also thinking about paper and ink and archival storage. Indirect costs could be everything from rent, electricity. I mean, if executives are getting involved in the approval process, that's another layer of cost going to it. The really interesting one that I like to talk to people though is around that hidden costs. It's a lot harder to quantify and define. And the most common and scary one that I speak to when I talk to organizations is project blowout. It really starts to hurt your ROI if you have projects in development that blows out beyond their go live date. So really what you've got to think about is where's a quick deploy, innovative, robust solution, something that can have a really strong partnership and mitigate all of those risks and those things that we want to show in AP Valet. Talking of risks, and this is surprisingly how often I start to hear some of these conversations, and I hope they resonate with you today. I mean, I was talking with an organization where we embedded an AP automation solution for a construction firm. What became apparent after we went go live was that one of their suppliers had been charging them for GST for the last 10 months without actually being GST compliant. The other area that we want to talk about is around bank details. So I was recently talking at another event, and the number of hands and companies that put their hands up to say that they've been receiving, fake invoices that looked almost perfectly, exactly right, that they've seen hundreds of times, except all that had changed was a little BSB and a little account number right down the bottom. I was floored at how many times that had actually been going on. So imagine that we could actually put a solution in place, something that can actually match those details to the back end and really kind of, protect yourself from that, from those frauds. And look, finally, we've got to talk about fraud by staff. And it's not all, we want to always believe that staff are doing the right thing. And 99 times out of 100, they will. But the 1%, that one individual that can ruin your business or act on something illegal, what we want to be able to do is actually have a lot of compliance, a lot of checks, and a lot of governance is in place. And what we want to be able to do is have that quickly put in into an organization. So how does this all work? What does actually AP Valet consist of? The first step, and where the partnership between ARM, IT, and Ephesoft grew from, is that capture step. The first step in the process. And what we do here is we capture the data via Transact by Ephesoft in its native format, whether it's a Word file, a TIFF, a JPEG, Excel, or even the body of an email or a PDF. We capture it in its native form. Then we classify, we identify, we're checking whether it's a PO, non-PO, credit note. We then need to establish, once we've established that, what data needs to be extracted, what needs to be validated, what then needs to be pushed out into the line of business. I mean, Transact is built into the AP Valet as a capture component for invoices. But it really goes a step further than that. AP Valet has a document enrichment step, a really unique process for invoices. It provides organizations like a real context on the information being extracted. Really, it's the new frontier in how information is not only being captured, but enhanced and being used. Look, AP Valet, as Matt will show, is one of the quickest time to market, time to production AP automation solutions out there. It's amazing that we're allowing a 4-week lead time to go live. We're going to see quicker ROIs. We're going to see more value added back into the organizations more than ever before. And that's becoming really key for a lot of stakeholders in these conversations, the value add roles that automation can bring. Beyond that, the AP solutions, cloud ready, multi-tenanted and mobile compliant. It's configurable rather than hard coded, which means that it can actually adapt to your organizations as you see fit. This is a massive, huge step going forward for AP automation solutions. Gone are the days of big, costly, bespoke solutions. We're really getting down into that framework of agility. And without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Matt to give you a little bit of overview of AP Valet and then dive into that live demonstration.
Thanks, Sean. So today I am going to present the latest version of AP Valet. And please bear with me, I won't actually do the old death by PowerPoint. I only have 3 slides that I want to take you through before we dive into the demo. But I want to shine a light on AP as we see it. And I think the best analogy I can come up with is AP processing, and like many other processes that are internal to an organisation, is a bit like an iceberg. And most people can only see what is sticking out above the water. And we refer that to that as the happy path. And in regards to that happy path for PO invoices, what's the happy path for PO invoices? Well, actually, the happy path where nothing goes wrong, there's actually nothing to see in our solution. Everything is automated and the invoice goes all the way through into the ERP ready for payment. Now, in terms of non-PO invoices, again, our happy path is just invoice approval step where managers are required to sign off on the spend that the organisation is making. So what does that actually mean? Because there is actually, we all know that invoice processing, it's actually that happy path. It only represents a small proportion of the overall process. It might actually represent a large volume of the invoice processing, but it's really the time that you spend managing the unhappy path is where I think our solution delivers in spades. So we're going to touch on some points in terms of that unhappy path and how we use our enrichment module to apply tax rules and currencies and check for duplicate invoices, and also look at bank account details and fraud detection activities that the system actually has. Now, in regards to matching, there is an auto match process, but what happens when you actually get an invoice that's got items that are on back order, or if the invoice amount actually doesn't match the PO amount, or is freight included in that PO? The other thing is, are there multiple purchase orders that have been assigned to that invoice? So our system actually deals with all of those exceptions in terms of the unhappy path. And we're going to demonstrate some of that. Coding of invoices. The system allows you to actually set auto-coding rules based on information that's stored on the invoice. So that might be the supplier, it might be the ABN number, it might actually be the address location from where the invoices come from, or the items in the actual description of the items in the invoice. Now, we also manage coding templates, which are a nice little productivity tool to actually improve and enhance that coding experience. And we also manage and deal with job management and budget management. And finally, approval. Now, I've had some customers that have actually used this approval module to act as a quasi goods receipting module, where they actually don't do goods receipting inside the ERP, and they have a very distributed organisational structure. So they actually use the approval step, even after matching has occurred, to actually signify that goods have been receipted, and also whether they want to make full payment, which is particularly useful in the construction industry, where invoices have an amount or a percentage amount that is actually held over for 12 months or at some other period of time. And we also obviously manage all the delegation of authority requirements associated with the approval process. So how does our AP Valet work, and what's the workflow that underpins this automation process? And I'm going to give 2 examples here. We've got PO invoices and non-PO invoices, and these are standard process flows that you can see here on the screen. The key thing to understand with regards to the PO invoices is that the items that you see there in grey are actually automated system processes, and the items in green are actually processes that a human interacts only when an exception occurs. And as you can see, if you actually look and count up how many happy and unhappy path processes there are there, there's actually nothing to do on a PO invoice. And on a non-PO invoice, the approval step is the only activity that you actually need to do for most of your invoices. So moving on to my last slide and what we're going to show you today. We're actually going to show you that invoice approval, how we do partial payment, how we may do a manual goods receipt, and we can also review the audit trail associated with the processing of that invoice. In terms of the unhappy path and these manual steps that require intervention, we're going to have a quick look at enrichment, where you can actually check the bank account details, look at a duplicate invoice, make sure you've actually assigned a PO invoice to a purchase order. And in terms of manual matching, we're going to look at how we can deal with multiple POs, how we can deal with partial matching on line items, and how you can actually deal with matching tolerances, and how the system tells you when an item is matched within tolerance or without tolerance. Finally, we're going to have a look at that manual coding. And again, this only occurs where the auto coding hasn't taken place. So we look at here, this is where we actually can do some of the machine learning and have coding rules saved, or we can apply coding rules. We can also split coding lines across the process and delete coding lines, etc. So a whole bunch of user functionality there. So without further ado, I'm actually going to just end this presentation and jump into the solution. Now, the first thing you might notice is that I'm actually performing this on a Macintosh. We've got a browser here, a Chrome browser. So what we're trying to demonstrate here is that the solution is client independent. It's all web-based tool. The tool's been developed for the latest HTML5 requirements, which means that the entire tool set here is available on a mobile device or a tablet. And the system actually, the screens actually scale to the requirements for that scenario. So you can see as my screen scrolls up, it actually adapts to the requirements. Now this is the work queue, and this is what users are greeted with when they actually log on to the system. First and foremost, what you're seeing here is tasks that have been assigned to my user ID, which is AP user. And you might notice that we've got the standard user functionality, which is log off and change password functionality included in the system. In it, we also have, I just will tell you, the ability to filter tasks based on, for instance, the category of tasks that we're actually performing. Or alternatively, in the system, you could filter tasks or sort tasks by the SLA. Now, this SLA is a calculated value, and it's actually calculated based on the due date of the invoice. Now, we collect that information from the terms associated with the supplier in the ERP, or the due date that's actually on the invoice if it's been extracted from Transact. Now, in terms of the integration with Ephesoft Transact, we automatically load the invoices in the background into the solution, and you'll see them appear here automatically in the actual work queue. I'm going to move into the search now, and if you're actually looking to find historical search of invoices that have been processed by the system and you want to review what's actually occurred with those invoices, there's all of the normal search functionality, dates, etc., that you can apply to documents as required. I'm just going to actually do a default search. I'm going to change my entries to 50. You might notice here that my page is reloading and searching for all of the invoices that have now been loaded into the system. And my search criteria actually can be adjusted based on the fields that I select here in the system. And I can add additional fields. You might notice there's quite a lot of fields here available as part of this search capability. Now the system allows me to also review the image. The image can be either stored in a file system or in the application that you see here. So as part of the export process, when we move the objects off to the ERP, the data, we can actually also move the image into the ERP or a file system that as you may need. You actually get a full history of the invoice as it's being processed, and you've got some nice little tools here also. This is consistent throughout the product. You'll see the ability to actually move the image and actually zoom in, zoom out, all the normal information that you see in regards to image processing. We can actually see the history of the document and how it's been processed. If anyone's made any comments associated with the processing of this document, it's actually then put in the attached to the transaction as it's processed. And if there's any supporting documents associated with the actual invoice, you can see those as well. So I'm just going to close this, and that really is the invoice search functionality. The other thing I was going to say is you can actually export this data straight out to a CSV file. It'll download it to your local desktop, and then you can do further analysis as you may see fit. Okay, let's go back to the work queue, and we'll take you through some examples. Now, we mentioned the happy path and unhappy path earlier. So first I'll do a demonstration of the happy path associated with non-PO invoices, which is that approval task. The approval task is quite simple, actually. It's a matter of opening up the approval screen on the actual machine. And it's then actually just, you've got an option here. You can review the image again. You can view line items associated with it. You can check any validations that have occurred within the actual invoice as it's been processed, and you get some information around the matching process in this scenario. We can also see the history associated with the processing of this invoice and who's worked on it. Are there any comments that actually have been placed with regards to this invoice and how it's been processed? And again, the supporting documents. Now, I've got a couple of options here also in terms of what I've got down the bottom of the page. I can actually save this for later because I'm not sure how I want to process it, or I've got to go off to another task. I can cancel this activity and any changes I've made will be cancelled. I can approve or reject it, or I could actually reassign this activity to another user who's allowed to actually perform this task. So for instance, I may have picked this up, I'm on leave, I'm not sure about this, I could reassign this task, and then the person that I nominate to actually process this approval will be recorded in the audit trail, but also they need to be authorised to perform that function. So it's on the fly delegated workflow in the system. Now I just want to show you there's some check boxes here, and in the administration area of the solution you can actually decide whether you want to confirm that goods have been receipted. The other thing that you can do is you can actually say, I want to actually select an individual line for partial payment. So I can actually, from here, create a payment schedule for individual lines. So I'm going to assign 80% of this payment on the 28th, and I'm going to make 20% of this payment take place in July. And the system will actually put that second amount on hold until such time as the invoice is ready for payment. It will then submit the items to the ERP. And if I want to see my part, here's my actual payment schedule down below. And if I want to see my payments as well, I can actually go back and view the payment schedule that I've created for that particular line. So down below, you get a payment summary for the invoice as a whole, and here you can actually break down the line items as individual items. And you can review, as part of this process, you can also review coding associated with all the various items. So here's the GL account codes that have been provided. You can also actually add additional information to this particular table. This is consistent throughout the whole product. You can actually customize the columns that are available and the order of these columns according to your requirements. And those settings will be saved so that later on you can actually have the advantage of those productivity tools that you've set up for yourself. So my options here are approve, cancel, reassign. I'm just going to approve this invoice, and I'm going to cancel it, and I'm going to go back to my work queue. So that's the happy parts associated with my processing. Now I'm going to talk to you about enrichment, and this is a key module associated with our product. I've loaded an invoice into an email earlier this morning, and I've placed it into the work queue. Now the system's automatically placed it in the work queue, and now I'm presented with the invoice on the left-hand side and all of the enrichment data that is actually associated with the invoice, where the data that's come off the invoice that's been extracted by Transact, and I'll show you this. So here we have all of the data that Transact has actually extracted off this invoice. You might note, I haven't picked up a lot of information. I've only picked up key pieces of information on this actual document. And that's because our enrichment task can build context around this invoice. And that enrichment process then creates what some refer to as actionable data, which actually will then allow you to see what's going on with regards to this invoice. So this is a PO invoice. We actually didn't have a purchase order on this scenario, but if there was a PO on this, it would be automatically assigned as a purchase order invoice into the system. And you might notice that I've got some validation flags here. So first, let's look at all the different validation flags. Now, Sean mentioned earlier that fraud prevention is one of the key functions of the solution. So the system's actually telling me that the extracted value doesn't equal what was actually stored in the database for this supplier. I actually can go to my image and bring it up, and you might notice in our scenario that the account number associated with this has been extracted with 18930, and what's on file is 18931. At this point, I could actually decide I'm going to reject this invoice right here and now. Alternatively, I could say, oh yeah, I'm familiar with that, and we will process this with the normal bank account details in place. I'm going to actually go in and select a purchase order. Now, there was no purchase order on this invoice. This invoice actually scenario doesn't have an invoice, a purchase order, so I'm actually going to search for open purchase orders that are associated with this particular invoice. I'm going to perform a search, and here's a list of open purchase orders that have been assigned for this invoice. Now I've got a number of purchase orders here, and you might note that there's $265 and $40. I'm going to actually pick up this purchase order, 10178, and assign this to the invoice. And with regards to the invoice number, I've got a flag here. And it's telling me that the invoice actually has been preloaded earlier. Surprise, surprise, I ran through this demo a couple of times getting ready for today. So what do I do with a duplicate invoice? I can actually see on the right-hand side, we've got the invoice that was loaded previously. On the left, you've got today's invoice and what we're processing. But not only that, we actually, so rather than having to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what the differences is, we actually tell you what the differences are between the two invoices and what's been extracted and what's been enriched. And you can see here that, yes, the date's changed. And there's a few other additional bits of information that have been processed with regards to this invoice. I'm going to close this, and you might note there's the invoice numbers that we've picked up. I'm going to close this, and I can actually, in the system, change the invoice number so that I can process it. Now, this is a typical process that a lot of organisations use for recurring invoices. So I'm going to just change that. Now, that information will actually be, I've used that example, so I'm going to actually go up an additional number, and there you can see my invoice number is now unique. But the system will actually store that that invoice number has been changed, and that will be placed in the audit trail. My due date, I can set the due date. There are no terms associated with this supplier, so I'm going to set the due date just as the 1st of March today. And the reason why that we've got a validation there saying that the field needs to be entered so that we can move on. Now, moving down, we can see actually the line items that have been extracted off this document and the tax code that is applicable to these line items. Now, I can actually, I'm just going to click on the amount here, and I'm going to zoom in so you can actually see my document, and whoops, I'm going to actually just on the fly, whoops, pick up this amount. System is actually validating the values across the line here and actually making sure that the line item totals add up. Now, what's happened here is the reason why the OCR engine confidence is low is because you can actually see there's a line that's going through these items. And that's the reason why we've got a low confidence on this. But we're okay with that information being of low confidence, and we'll move on. So further down the list, you might notice that we've actually got a validation flag here, and it's telling me that my totals are incorrect on this particular item. Now, that's because I've set a setting in the system where I need to adjust the freight, and I need to code the freight with my item. So I'm actually going to code the freight item, and this is header level freight information that I'm coding here. I can actually, I'm not quite sure I might not be sure what my freight account is. So I'm actually going to do a search for that. And I'm going to look at my general ledger here, and I'm going to search across the general ledger. Now, the system will actually support up to 12 dimensions in the general ledger. I've got a fairly simple example here with regards to the processing. And I've done that so that we can see the simplicity of the search functionality. But let's search for freight as an expense account. So I'm just going to do a on-the-fly search here of the description. I'm going to select my freight account, and I'm going to actually then, I've selected my freight, and I'm going to actually apply that code that I searched to the selected amount. You might notice my amount remaining up here is now 0. So I've coded my freight amount. I'm going to actually close that. And that will now go with the invoice itself. I'm going to recalculate my totals. And you might note on the right here, we've got what was extracted off the invoice. And on the left here, we've got what's extracted from the image. And on the right, we've got what's been enriched. The enriched value is actually applying the tax rules. It's applying all of our business rules associated with quantity times unit price to give us a total price. We all know, those that have worked in AP functions, there are some items that you'll see on an invoice that are tax inclusive, and there'll be other items that are actually no tax. And the system does actually support the ability to set those at a line item level if you are doing line item extraction. I'm going to complete that activity, and that really shows the functionality associated with enrichment. Now that actual invoice has gone off to the engine and come back and said it's gone through an automated matching process, and it's now actually come back and it's sitting in the work queue here. So this demonstrates how fast the solution is and how quickly you can process items through work queues. Now, I mentioned earlier that I picked up only 4 line items of that invoice, and I've actually left 1 line item that is unmatched in my processing. And the reason why I wanted to do that was I wanted to demonstrate the unhappy path with regards to matching. So the auto match has actually gone off, matched the line items against the purchase order. But what we've also got is we've got another purchase order that is associated with this individual invoice. And what I want to let you know also is that the unit price is $40 and the unmatched amount on the purchase order is $40, but the unmatched amount on the invoice is $41. You might notice also we're doing remaining amount matches here. So we can actually do a partial line item match. So I'm going to actually select the invoice line, and I'm going to manually match it to this actual line item that you see here. And as I manually match this, the system is going to tell me, it's going to raise some validation flags and say that the line item unit price has not matched within tolerance. And what that means is, it's matched within tolerance. And we set a tolerance on the unit price for line items. And so with that ability, we actually are told here that that item has actually matched within tolerance. Now I'm going to actually cancel out of here, and I'm going to move into coding and show you what coding looks like. And we're talking about coding rules and the application of those coding rules. Okay, so we've got 2 examples I want to just show you, and I've gone into the wrong one there, but I'll just cancel that, and I'll go into one that we've actually set up. JJ Richards & Sons is an invoice that we've actually processed through to the coding step, and it's actually been auto-coding. There's nothing left to be coded on this invoice. The system has actually applied a coding rule with this particular invoice. And the coding rule is that we've actually applied waste disposal to invoices that are sent by JJ Richards. And the system will automatically code all of invoices that come from JJ Richards to this account. This coding rule is actually quite sophisticated in that we're sending 100% to an account. And if there is actually a scenario where we've got like 50%, 30%, 20%, and there will be a rounding dollar percentage amount, like a couple of cents, you then have to allocate where are you going to put the remainder to. So the system actually accommodates those percentage matches, percentage coding that needs to take place. I'm just going to go in here and show you that this coding rule has been applied and all of the items have been coded to that 665. Now I'm going to actually just say, yep, I'm happy with that, and move on. Now I'm going to go into that other coding example that I showed you earlier. And in this scenario, this invoice hasn't been coded. There's $111 left to be coded, and we may actually manually code it. We might want to split this particular item, this item, across a number of business units. So the system will automatically split the amounts and divide the percentage for you. But you can change the percentage if you want, make it a 20/80 or something like that. Alternatively, I'm going to clear those lines, and I'm actually going to say, you know what, I want to apply a rule. And this is a pre-selected template that actually has been put in the system. And I'm going to select this rule and apply a coding rule to this invoice. Now, if we had multiple distributions, they'd automatically be placed here in the coding set. And just to make sure that we take care of that assisted learning function, we can save this rule and actually use it for later. So our system gets more productive and more automated as we use it. So you're not going back and doing repetitive tasks. Just last thing I want to show. Now I want to add a comment to this particular item, and the comment actually then gets sent with the invoice as part of the history. I'm going to complete that, and actually that is a very, very short introduction to AP Valet.
Thanks, Matt. I hope everyone who's been listening and watching that short demonstration has gained a lot out of it. From my personal opinion, from what I've seen and what I've interacted and looked at with Matt around this, I like the speed, I like the configuration, I like the capabilities within this solution. One of the great things that I've witnessed with this solution, AP Valet, is the real estate. I've seen a lot of organizations who've developed really robust, really complicated, really bespoke solutions that only cater for one organization only. At this point in time, we really want to be able to kind of be out there and instigate this into a variety of different organizations. Now, just to kind of wrap up, and I do again appreciate everyone giving us their time this afternoon. There'll be a follow-up email post webinar. Beyond that, we'll also have a couple of follow-up steps that you can adhere to, so that if you want to have a deeper dive within AP Valet, if you want to see how it's going to really enhance and improve your business and really take you guys forward within that AP automation space, then we'll have the capability, Matt will have the ability to kind of come in and really show you how it's going to fit within your organization. Look, finally, just between us, Matt and I, this afternoon, we want to thank you again for your attendance. Hopefully you've gained a lot and looked at, the new frontier and what's going to be, I think, a really fantastic and brilliant tool to be used in the AP space.